Welcome to the Teacher's Toolkit for Literacy, the free podcast for motivated teachers and school leaders who want to inspire their students and school community in literacy learning. Make sure you subscribe to the show on your favourite podcast player, and for more amazing literacy resources, check out the show notes provided with every episode.
Hi, I'm Sharon, and I'm the host of a Teacher's Toolkit for Literacy. In every Toolkit episode, we bring you specific resources, tools, strategies, tips, techniques to help you in your job as a teacher of literacy. Firstly, we acknowledge and pay our respects to the Kaurna people, the traditional custodians whose ancestral lands we gather on. We acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and relationship of the Kaurna people to country, and we respect and value their past, present, and ongoing connection to the land and cultural beliefs. Hello, everybody.
Welcome, everyone, to the podcast. In every episode, we bring you specific resources, tools, strategies, tips and techniques to help you in your job as a teacher of literacy. It's all about developing you as a professional, and we hope to make a difference in the choices that you make for the betterment of your students, and we hope we open some doors for you in this podcast particularly. It's all about using the fullness of the Australian curriculum, and we believe that great teaching can never be packaged into a program. And we really emphasised using children's literature, quality children's literature that surrounds our students, and it's also central to our teaching. Sharon, I'd just like to chat about, I was just noticing in our studio the other day, my old projector that I found, or discovered again, that I used to use as a child when we'd buy film strips from the hobby store, and I'd wind those film strips through the projector, just had an ordinary globe in it, and we would tell a story.
Well, what kinds of things were on the film strips?
Well, there would have been stories, a lot of Disney stories like Sleeping Beauty or Pinocchio, and Davy Crockett, and I would turn each slide one at a time and then
tell the story,
and then I would put some music to it. I put a record on the old gramophone, and try and match.
Gramophone or record player? You had a gramophone?
Well, it was called a gramophone, yeah. It had a record player.
I seriously didn't think you were that old.
Oh, I've heard about them. But, and then there was a radio in there and speakers all in one. So it was called a gramophone.
Okay.
I'm sure it was. I think it was. Anyway, I try and match the music, the mood of the music with that particular film. And then later on, as I got older, I started to do that as a hobby for people's birthdays and 21st and whatever, where we put with more whiz-bang projectors and music to make
and slides rather than film strips
to make a story of their lives. So I just thought that was great, and also that I'd lost all those films, and then one day we drove to Burra and we went to an antique shop and we found a box full of those old film strips with the exact ones I used to use.
Yes. Did we find the projector as well, or you still had that?
We may have found the projector as well.
I think we found the whole set. I think someone in your family sold it off and you bought it back.
I would have got a fortune for it. No. Anyway, so that was an interesting story.
Actually, and just to add to that, like our children have really enjoyed getting that film strip projector out and doing that telling of the story along with the what is essentially slides, isn't it?
Yeah, it is really.
So so really such a great technique for the retelling of a story, because retelling is an important strategy.
Yep.
It really helps us learn a lot about story and how it works.
And now you do it all on an iPad or a computer, and it's all a bit different, but the original idea is still there.
Yes.
Yep. All right. Today's podcast, we're looking at reading like a writer, but with informational text. What's the story here, Sharon?
Oh, well, why have I chosen this? Well, apart from the fact that reading like a writer is something that, as writers, I often say we can only write as well as the texts that we're surrounded by and the texts that we are looking at, we're immersed in, we're learning about how they work, about what the writer's done, so exploring and wondering and noticing and discovering. And so we did do an earlier podcast. I think we just called it Reading Like a Writer.
We did.
And this one, I really wanted to focus in on informational text. So talking about some of the same strategies as we did with Reading Like a Writer, but what that means specifically for informational texts.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And I would say it would cross across primary and secondary?
Yes, without a doubt.
Yep,
Yes,
yep.
yeah.
So the teaching struggle is that you were noticing...
Sorry, you've missed question number one. Can I just, because there's something really exciting that I wanted to talk about there.
A story from the schools.
Yes, so something that's happened in this last week in school. So reception teacher and her wonderful reception teacher and her fabulous little class, this term they have borrowed out, so setting up classroom library in their classroom, and the teacher has borrowed huge collections of books by a whole range of authors. So Eric Carle, Pat Hutchins, Pamela Allen,
Mem Fox.
Huge bundles of, every book available really around those authors. And she started setting up author displays. So photograph of the author, and there are all the books by that author along with it, so that as they read, so this is really connecting again to what we're talking about today, but not informational text, but this reading like a writer. So they're going to be reading books by the author, and then they're going to be thinking about what kinds of techniques and things that author does so that they can experiment and adapt, as we have in the Australian curriculum, with their own bookmaking, with making mini books of their own adaptations, innovations, versions of those stories.
Fantastic.
So these are some still to turn 5, children who are, who started last term with mini bookmaking and have just launched back into this term. So excited about reading like a writer and reading like and writing like Pamela Allen or Mem Fox. Or Mem, you'll be thrilled to know that, all these little budding writers are, we learn so much from the company we keep.
Yep.
So
such rich models for them to look at and then use the same structures and or similar structures,
or it might be topic, or it might be that innovating on it. There isn't a set. It must look like this.
Yep.
It's really opening the doors for letting children experiment and adapt with their own book creation.
Yep.
Being inspired by these wonderful writers. So I absolutely just wanted to share that piece because just love the work that's happening in that classroom.
No, it's lovely. Okay, on to our topic again.
Yep. Yes.
Reading like a writer, but informational texts.
Yes. So the teaching struggle there, I will say quite up front, my teaching struggle was the very ordinary and featureless informational writing that I was getting from my students. And by that I mean that when I looked at a piece of informational writing that my students had done, I noticed 2 things. One, it was often copied, so the text was just as it was. And secondly, it didn't look like a rich informational text. It wasn't full of the features of informational texts. So the struggle for me then was thinking, right, so how do I elevate informational writing outside of a form, just one structure of writing, so an informational report? How did I help students to become feature rich in their writing so that they were using the features of informational texts to really elevate the readership, so what other readers could gain from their writing, and to also use those features to transform their own learning and understanding into features other than just text alone, or printed off photo that included the caption. How could they learn about the purpose and the reason and what we learn from all the features that we can include in informational texts?
Fantastic.
So that was, I've had a few, what I always refer to as very privileged opportunities in life, and one that really connected with this was at the time when Era Publications here in South Australia, Era Publications, still a South Australian grown publishing company of educational resources, were creating a lot of big books and a lot of informational big books. And I was very fortunate to be one of the trialling teachers for those big books, which meant that I could use the draft versions with students to work out the effectiveness of them and to give feedback about, how it helped them as readers and writers. And through that process, there was a lot that I learned about the ways that text features can be used so effectively, and that there was actually such a range of text features, which I'll talk a bit more in detail about what they all are in a moment. But that really opened my eyes to me thinking, I know that I'd been modelling, how do I write an information report, but I hadn't been bringing to my students great, exceptional, tantalising examples of really rich, feature-loaded information texts, and I was really just modelling a very basic structure and not really getting. I knew my students were well capable of doing more than that, but I hadn't opened the doors to what could be included in informational text. So that was one of the things that really turned me around into thinking, oh, right, this is what I can be bringing to students. And, of course, that is part of the Australian curriculum at all year levels, about looking at features of texts.
Right, yes.
So in the fullness of the Australian curriculum, we want to be, we want to be bringing, and so in some ways today I also want to explore, well, what are those features of informational text?
Yes.
Because that was a big learning curve for me around what are all the features.
Yeah, and that's
and what do they mean?
Fantastic learning that you happen to have through this process, and you can now share that with everyone so that they can be a step ahead.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 So,
so where do we start with it? Yeah.
All right. So maybe the first thing that I really want to explain, though, is that why are text features even important?
Yes, because I was going to say that there's a lot of now children or students looking at the internet and getting their information from that. And then there are the books or texts that have got a lot of work put into them to provide those features. But when we look at the internet, we're not seeing some of those features. Am I guessing right there, Sharon?
That is true.
Yeah.
That I did say that exceptional, tantalising texts are what we need to bring. And as I often say, is like we can only write as well as the text that we're surrounded by. So when we've got exceptional models of these things, we're going to learn so much more as a reader about how texts work and how to use that as a writer. So there's one thing to be quite mindful of when we're pointing students in the direction of texts to gather information from. Sometimes they are very text heavy, and it's very difficult for students then to gather that information and then think, okay, how do I translate that into anything other than more text? But if I'm being given text that's got lots of different features to it, and I know what all of those, the purpose of those features, and then I can bring those together, then I get a much richer understanding of what I'm reading about, what I'm learning. So
you've got text with examples of how these features are being placed really powerfully, then they will pick that up and use it within their own.
So we want to use, so let me just go back to the why, and then let's go through this a bit of a process. But I think I'll also define first what we mean by text features. But first up, why would we want to read like a writer, to be looking at text features? Because it does improve. So when we use those text features, it really improves for anyone reading our work. It absolutely increases their understanding of what information we're trying to get over. Text features also mean if we've got a good understanding of a range of text features, that means that the information that we have learned, discovered, that we're wanting to present, we've got multiple ways of sharing that information, not just through text alone. We've got all these ways of making this, so if I've learned about something, I've got lots of ways to present it in conjunction with each other, and all of that supporting each other. And we're much more sophisticated in our presentations of information in that way. And from reception, children are very capable of that if we're aware of what the features can mean and do. Being able to read and understand the purpose and function of text features actually improves our comprehension. So when we are taking information from text, it shouldn't just be the written text alone. It is all the other features that we want to add in there. Think captions, think maps, think tables, think diagrams. All of these things add to our bank of information. And then informational texts are really just hugely rich in their resourcefulness for us learning about our world. So even in some of the visual texts we see, let's think, and I'll mention this again a bit later, but in something like a David Attenborough documentary, we're actually seeing some features in there alone of a visual nature. Things like sometimes there's a close-up, sometimes it's slow motion, sometimes it'll be a time lapse. All of these things are ways of presenting information. But today I'm going to concentrate mostly on text-based informational text, but I will refer again to the importance of the visual information too. So, first up, so if we want students to really be successful at navigating informational text and creating it, that's why we're wanting them to really be reading like a writer. And so text features are defined by any components of text that aren't considered to be the main body of the text.
Right, okay.
So whatever we're looking at, well, that's the main body of it. Anything outside of that...
Like a diagram or a graph or...
So we then talk about there being three major features or categories. Three major categories of text features. First of all, there's print features. So there are things like headings, titles, subheadings, italics, bold, print, and these
Captions.
Yeah, so so I'm just giving a few examples here at the moment because I'll go through more, but the purpose, the category and the function of print text features, it's the actual text of the feature that supports the reader. So it's the actual text. So the print feature means anything that is text that's supporting the writer. So as we said, like
The reader?
Sorry, the reader.
Yep.
So bold, it's the print itself, it's bold, and that's cueing us into, why is that in bold? What is that referencing? Is it an important word or does that link to a glossary? But it is giving us some support in some way. So print features, the print is giving us support. Then there's graphic features. So once again, I'll just give a few examples, but they'll be things like diagrams, maps, and they're image-based. So graphic features are image-based, and they may or may not include print as part of them. But it's the image itself and it's the way that that's presented that helps the reader understand the text.
Yep.
So the diagram, the map, the table, they are things that are giving the information and might not include any text. And then the third category is organisational features. And organisational features are structures. It's not only text that supports the reader, but they're structures like a table of contents or an index. So they have a particular structure to them. So they're the three categories: print, graphic, organisational. So then how would we work with those? So really we know that sort of one-shot text feature activities actually give very little guidance to, for informational text features in a comprehensive and meaningful way. If we're just doing something in isolation, here's we might have a task sheet on what is a table of contents. Those kinds of tasks we need to spin it to not something isolated, but we need to spin it into a process of inquiry.
Okay, yep.
So when we do take an inquiry stance, then we can start thinking about reading and understanding how a text feature works. We can think about, how does that work by reading like a writer? So we talked about a process earlier in the reading like a writer, one where we can name and notice.
Oh, yes, yep.
So name and notice, what do we have here? We might have a map. So that's our first sort of stance is to name and notice. Then we can explore, how does that work? Then we can as a writer, we can demonstrate how that works. And of course, then we want students trying it out so that they can choose and use that feature in text as they need. So as they're wanting to present information, they're building a bank of text features that they know that they can choose and use, because that's what literacy is, choosing and using. So we would come back to that workshop structure. So we would have mini lessons. First, back one step, the text. We want to it needs to start with text. So we need to be looking at text. The more sophisticated, the more exceptional it is, the better, because we can see the best examples of this based on whichever age group we're working with.
So to give an example, would we say we were looking at tables as a feature, we would be looking at that in a mini lesson, and then they would be looking for those examples in...
Okay, I haven't got there yet, Phil.
Oh, I'm a step ahead.
You are a step ahead. I'm really just drawing to the point that we've got to have text to begin with. I can't have a worksheet with a table. I need to see a table in a meaningful text, if that's what I'm looking at, table, whichever feature, I want text that we've been working with or that is part of something we're learning about so that I get to see how this works. And I just want good examples of that. And I want it large enough for everybody to see. So that might mean that I take part of that and it's now projected onto the whiteboard, or I might have a big book version of it. There's a lot of informational texts that are quite large. A lot of informational texts are often in a bigger format than regular texts, so it may be big enough for everybody to see. If I'm working whole class, if I'm working small group, one text amongst the small group might be enough and we can share around that. But my mini lesson will be pulled from that. So we're going to be looking at, first of all, we're going to identify, name and notice what is the text feature. So from that text, I would begin by naming and noticing it. But there may be somebody in the class, the group, who'll go, and if they know, like we want them to draw in information here now, but I'm definitely bringing in the first instance the focus into what we're looking at. Then as teacher, I would model and explain through a think aloud how readers gain information from that feature. So how it works. So what I'm doing as a reader to gather the information. Now, if we think about a print feature like a heading, that I can absolutely talk about how a reader uses that to gather information. What does a heading tell us? A heading tells us, what comes beneath this is all information to do with this heading. The heading is intentionally chosen for that body of information. So we now can explore, first of all, teacher modelling and explaining how we use that as a reader. So we are actually reading to know how it works and how this is helping us to understand that. And we're concurrently learning how to read like a writer, because for us to be able to then know how to create an effective heading, we've looked at what the author's done here to create an effective heading, and we're learning from that so that we can use headings as a tool in our writing. So by the teacher using that think aloud, we can then continue to explore and discuss why the author's chosen to use that particular feature and where it's positioned in the text. Because every feature has a reason for it to be positioned where it is. So
positioning is a key part of this, do you think?
Yeah. So a heading, where is that going to be positioned?
Yep.
Bold, where is that going to be positioned? Well, actually, that probably is an example of it's not necessarily needing to be positioned in a particular place. But we are intentionally choosing which word to be bolded. Now, if it's for a glossary, then I'm thinking about my glossary. Where am I positioning a glossary? Sometimes we use that as it may be on the same page at the bottom, or there might be a separate glossary at the back of the book. So all of these things we start considering. Where does it go? What does it do? And where does it go? So these explorations we want to explore together and we want to discuss together. So it's not just teacher doing the talking. Exploration, that's our other. We had name and notice. We had exploration when we're reading like a writer. So we want to go looking at that example. We can also then go exploring and looking for that feature in other texts. So we can go on feature hunts to go and look, in the books that we've got at the moment or the ones we're working with, where do we see that feature? Let's look at how that works. So that's opportunity then for us to practice identifying, looking for, naming it, and working out what it's doing for us.
So a wide range of informational text in your classroom as part of your classroom library is pretty essential.
Yes.
Yep.
And if it's not in the classroom library, if there's not just a static collection, for different units of work that we're doing, different concepts and topics that we're studying, we want to bring in lots of informational texts so that students have got their eyes on the page and looking at how pages can be organised and intentionally orchestrated using these features.
And we're so lucky we've got such a wonderful resource of non-fiction books out there, haven't we? Like, it's just
yes,
amazing.
and it's growing.
Yep.
It's not slowing down. The access we have to incredible informational text. So it's easy to bring in lots of informational text. In secondary schools, you may be using, you may have textbooks for subjects. Now, mostly textbooks are written, in the sciences, geography, are well written, well constructed, using all of the features that we're after. So, those books, how we read those books, for some students, this exploration can be really important, thinking about how do I read this and how do I learn from it so that I can write like that.
Yep.
Now, one of the things that I think is important too is that we're actually developing a common language around what are the features and of texts. And in a classroom, that's really useful, and school-wide, even better. So that year upon year, these are consistent things. These are, a table is always a table. A map is always a map. A labelled diagram is a labelled diagram. So being able to choose and use, it's good for us to name these things and have the language for it. So that's where it's also important that we might anchor these terms on a chart and also list with that what the function and purpose is of that feature. Now, I'm actually aware that right at the moment, this sounds really boring. I'm just feeling like, and next do this and da-da-da-da. But it's actually so exciting to be looking, exploring and learning about how these work. And from our earliest of readers and writers, they astonish me. They know far more than we
give credit for.
Yes, that, except 5-year-old teachers, they always give credit to their, it's just sometimes as, outside of that classroom, we don't always remember just how much they bring. So once we're looking for different, as I said, anchoring what a text can bring, so this text feature can bring, it's great to collect examples of it. And to also think about, and examples of all these different types of features, print, organisational, graphic, but also to think, let's define that text feature. What is that text feature? And I'll go into a little bit more detail in a moment. And then to explore and explain how it actually assists the reader. Because if I explore that, I'm reading like a writer. How does it assist the reader? Then I can then use it as the writer, knowing exactly how I'm assisting my reader.
Right. Yep.
Yes?
Yes.
you should look suitably impressed there, Phil.
I am.
Yes. So thinking about how does this feature help the reader, there is a resource on Teachific that looks at all of the different print, graphic and organisational features.
Yep. And we'll have a link to that.
Yes, and gives
in the show notes
some information. Doesn't give an example, but so there are some little posters. Doesn't give an example of it because your students should be the ones collecting examples, identifying and collecting. I think it just completely diminishes it if an example is given, a ready-made example is given. They should be the ones to be able to identify and know that that's what it is.
Hence the inquiry approach.
That's it. So when we think, so if we say, okay, title, what is a title? What's its definition? Well, the title is the name of a text located in on the front cover or at the beginning of a chapter. That's what a title is. So these posters that I've created actually give the definition of those. How this feature helps the reader isn't on the poster. That's the inquiry. That's the let's work out how does this feature help us as a reader. And so let me read that like a writer so that I can transform that information into what I do as a writer. So how the feature helps, how does a title help the reader? Well, it indicates the topic and or the main idea of the entire text. Not just part of it, the entire text. Because a heading indicates the main idea of a section of text. So then we can start using, let me think of a title for this entire text. Now this part of the text, what's my heading going to be? So we can become much more clear about what it is we're actually creating and not be confused about, is that a title? Is that a heading? What's it doing? And when would we start this? We start this in reception. First year. These are, they're making a book. We create a title. So title is definitely one of the things early on. So thinking about the definition of each text feature and definition, we can be exploring definitions. We don't have to give it to students, but we do actually, we want to be precise about those definitions and we want them to be meaningful so that we're not building confusion about those things.
Yep.
All right, so then we can demonstrate how we would use that text feature in a purposeful written context. So I might model, demonstrate in a piece of writing I'm doing with the students, model how I'm choosing and using particular text features. So it might be that one we're focusing on at the moment, or I might start drawing in a whole lot that we've been using, but I want to be demonstrating and showing how I'm choosing and using the features, the text features that I want to incorporate into the writing that I'm doing, the informational writing that I'm doing. So that anchoring it on the chart is important so that it's there for choice and use. And I know that I'm, choosing, that I've got the right use for it. So I think I've already mentioned just a couple of things to note, that text features aren't standalones. So that's when, if we're doing a text feature task sheet, it's not really helpful because it needs the body of the text to connect with it. So that's why we want to work with authentic, rich, tantalising text, because students have to comprehend context both from the text and the feature. So they are working in synergy with each other. They are, like I said, it's not a standalone sitting out there on its own. I've seen plenty of children, I'm sure we all have, who've got a photograph that they've printed off or a picture that they've printed off, and the caption, they may have left the caption on there, and the caption actually hasn't got anything to do with what the student's written in the text. So in that way, we're creating our own text because they work together. We're creating our own caption that fits. What is this photograph or this picture? What is it showing that gives me more meaning to the body of the text? And so we want to keep reminding ourselves and students that they belong together, that they're not just sitting in isolation of each other, so that they're connected. And then, the other thing that I just wanted to note was I mentioned before about viewing exceptional documentaries and visuals, it's really choosing some of those really stunning, do I call them cinematographic
Yep.
representations, because that's where we can get a lot of information. We can learn a lot from the viewing of information, viewing and listening to. Now, those as texts, I've always found them to be extraordinarily beneficial for students to be able to really take in information, to gather information, and then to be able to note and to write down and to process through writing what they've learnt without just lifting text off a page.
Right.
Just copying it off the page. This way we're really giving them a chance to learn, to understand, to build the language and the ideas around this from a whole lot of information. We might do it in segments, but what it really is allowing students to draw on then is to choose and use a whole range of informational text features to present their information, so that it's not just going to be shown in text. And we can prompt in that way. So we might have, I'm just going to go with something, say, like a life cycle. And we might say, well, we've just learnt about the life cycle of a creature through this wonderful documentary or this wonderful clip, and then video or whatever, and then we can say, okay, how can we represent that in labelled diagrams so that we can guide our readers into thinking about how they can represent it, as well as leading them into how else. So what will you choose to use to present that information, so that we're always giving opportunity then for choice and use around those things.
Fantastic.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I'm just going to do a really quick run through now I just gave a few examples before of all the print, graphic and organisational features, but I do want to just give a complete list of those. Although having sat here, I am thinking of a couple of other things that I don't think are on the list. One of those would be numbering.
Oh, yes. Yep.
And that would be a print feature. So print features, here we go. Titles, headings and subheadings, bold print, italics, captions, as he said, pronunciation guides, bullets, and sidebars. Might say, do you know what a sidebar is, Phil?
Yeah, I have seen sidebars in text, yeah.
What is a sidebar? Can you tell me could you define a sidebar?
Well, it's text that supports the main text, but it's maybe highlighting a particular feature of what's in there, or
See, I've really put you on the spot here, but nice work. This is
right.
like we should do with our students too.
Yep.
What do they know?
Mm.
So let's inquire about that a little bit further. So if we were looking at, if I was showing you an example of a sidebar, we would see that it is additional text
Yep.
and it's not the main body of the text. So as we said, that's a feature. When it's not the main body, it's additional, it's supporting, an aspect of, and it may frequently be sitting. Where it's sitting, I'll come to that. It's sometimes in a box, and it's often with a shaded background.
Yep, I've noticed that.
Yeah, and it can be located at the side, the top, or the bottom of a page. But it's called a sidebar. It can be sitting side or top or bottom, but somewhere to the side of text.
But that's its official name, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, sidebar.
A sidebar. So how does it help the reader? It's providing additional information, facts or information that's related to the text.
And you ask the students to, through your rich collection of books, to look for examples of sidebars so they can know the different ways. You know, one child might find it at the bottom and another one finds it at the top. And
Yes.
and through the discussion then, the thinkers talking,
Yeah.
you would then come to a closer definition of what a sidebar is,
Yes.
and it'll probably start to match your official
Yes.
definition.
And so in that process of inquiry, we would start talking about, how this feature helps readers. We start making generalisations about that and about the definitions of it. So this is what helps us come to a clear understanding. We're not just being told what it is, we're exploring what it is, noticing, discovering, inquiring about how it works.
And the talking would be critical.
Yes, yes.
Yep.
So it's so exciting. We might not send everyone off, go and look for a sidebar. Not all books will have a sidebar, but we might go off in search of a few features, or we
Okay,
might go
yep.
off in search of just name and notice as many features as you can
Right.
on this page or in this text. But when we're looking at a particular feature, I want to have some examples of that so that we can see and that we can start looking at. That's why I want some enlarged text, so we can look at how does this work. Here is, in this book in our classroom, this is what the sidebar looks like on this page. And we've read this book before, but here it is. We've never named and noticed that this is a sidebar. So in that way, we go exploring. There isn't a script for it. It's let's go noticing. Let's go naming, to try and work out, to define it and to know how it will help the reader, because that's what's going to help us as the writer.
But gradually you're building up this bank of features that you're all noticing as individuals or groups or a class, and you're
Yes, yeah.
building up this bank of,
Yes.
it could be in a big book that you're doing it, or a
Could be
chart.
in a big book, chart, somewhere we want to have it anchored.
Yeah.
So that we can see not only examples of it, but its purpose, its definition, and so that we can readily draw on that and go, oh, yeah, I'm doing a sidebar. Oh, it's mostly shaded at the back, so that's what I'll need to do. So I've got a shading behind that.
Yeah.
Like, listen to how that elevates. Like, I have seen such young children doing these things because they just so get excited about, this is about being a writer. This is about being not just, like I said before, that we can only write as well as the texts that are brought to us. And if I've got texts that are rich with these features, I can learn how to use those. And that absolutely elevates.
If we find out what they are and we discuss them,
Yes.
we might move along a bit with the next group of features.
Okay, yes. So graphic features, photographs with or without captions, drawings with or without captions, insets. So an inset, a small photo, picture or map inside or next to a larger picture, and it magnifies part of the larger picture. So that's what an inset is. Cross-section, cutaway, diagram, label diagram, map, graph, chart, table, timeline. So all of these as features. And then organisational features, table of contents, index, glossary. So in thinking about like what would we teach at different year levels, first year of school, I would definitely be doing titles, captions, including photographs and captions for those, drawings with captions, an inset, this idea of a big picture and then having a close-up of part of it.
Oh, that's fun.
They love that.
They would.
Yes, so if we're looking at mini beasts, I'm doing my mini beast informational text. Here's the picture of the dragonfly, and here's a close-up of, its wing or its, a part of it. So really easily we can, and lots of our early texts, why would we even include that? Not only do children love to do them, they'll find them. A lot of texts for early readers include insets.
Okay.
So that's why we would have that, is because they're going to come across it. They're going to come across any of these things: titles, captions, photographs, drawings, insets, table of contents. They will come across table of contents. So these are all things that we want to show them how to read and how to read so they can use it as a writer.
Right, from the first year of school.
Yes. They absolutely revel in including these features. That's, like I said, just elevates their writing to a different level. And if they're doing lots of making books and mini books, making mini books, etc., this is the ideal time to choose and use lots of the features. Year 1, all of those things, plus headings, bold print, pronunciation guides, and then every graphic feature and organisational feature that we've talked about. So pretty much everything in year 1, because once again, they're going to come across them in their reading. And year 2 onwards, it's everything.
And I might add that there'll be crossover between grades, of course, where...
Oh, without a
but
doubt.
You're giving a general guide for where those things
That's
sit.
it.
Yep.
Just a guide or an expectation that they would be things that, we're not really holding back. And, of course, we're not holding back from anything that, a first year of school child says, oh, what is that? How does that work? I want to. If we've come across it in a book, I'm going to bring that to them. And, of course, the texts that our students are going to be working with as they age are going to be more and more sophisticated and detailed and offer more... in every text, offer more and more of those features at a time.
Is it a case of secondary students where a secondary student is struggling with reading, that these features really help them navigate those texts?
Yes. And one of the resources that I was actually going to mention in... it's a tantalising text. I was actually going to mention a text that's written just about this, that's called Reading the Whole Page. And that's in reference to what you've just asked about, for those students who aren't feeling as successful, who might be striving in their reading, teaching them how to read the whole page, reading all of these features and what they may get it means they're getting so much more out of the
Yep,
text,
yep.
so much more. We've got lots of readers who like to read texts that have got lots of text features in them, but they don't always know that that's connecting to the body of the text,
Yep.
or that's so really teaching them not only about the feature itself, but how it connects to everything else on the page or to the chapter or to the book is really empowering for our readers and how they can translate that to then into their writing.
So that's a bit of gold for secondary teachers.
Yes,
Yep.
yes. Yes, we've done lots of work with secondary teachers around looking at features of text and how to read a table, but not only how to read the table, how to use that with the information on the page. And often our tables and these features, we're guided to where it's linked to the information because it will often reference it. So it might say this piece of text might say refer table 1.3
Yep.
or diagram 1.3. So all of these things...
Because non-fiction becomes such a big thing in secondary school, doesn't it? It's across all the subject areas. If you can read really well in non-fiction, it's such a strong thing for you. Sorry, I'm trying to get my ideas out.
You're doing a Sharon. But that's exactly why we begin it early, because informational text, and as I said, Australian curriculum, it's right there about the structures and features of informational text. If we are enabling our students to read, it comes back to it again though, doesn't it, about the extraordinary, the exceptional texts we're bringing to students.
Should I say tantalising?
Yeah, you should. But that doesn't take away from the simple texts that we're also working with that allow us to focus on particular features. So the book, Reading the Whole Page, Teaching and Assessing Text Features, is by Michelle Kelly and Nikki Clausen-Grace. We'll link that in the show notes.
Yep.
And I actually just want to give a big call out to both of these women, Michelle and Nikki, because they, once again, those privileged experiences that you have in a project that I worked on a few years ago where I wrote 36 informational texts. There's a nice little interruption. Writing 36 informational texts for 5 and 6-year-olds. It was working with Michelle and Nikki that really helped me include really wisely and thoughtfully and mindfully a full range of informational text features for our youngest readers.
Right.
So, and they were wonderful in giving feedback to the text that I was writing and to the notes that we were writing about that. So
this was a series of texts you were writing for 5-year-olds?
5 and 6-year-olds.
5, 6,
yes.
And these authors gave you feedback on the books that you were writing?
Yes, yes. And in fact, in some of their, just to make a little connection here, in some of their articles that they have written, they've referenced those books as being books that provide really great models of text features for young readers.
I think we should provide a link to those books. What are they called?
That was the Leap series.
Right.
What's called Leap, not The Leap.
Yeah.
Leap. And in
non-fiction.
Non-fiction, 12 big books, 36 little books.
Right.
So that was just, we've got tables in there. We've got table of contents. We've got bold. We've got headings. We've got time. We've got lots. We tried to include many features so that we could look at. But we can do that with any. We just need to bring text. We need to notice it, name it.
But having rich models from the start of school is fantastic because they're learning about these things right through, but they can
Yes.
start really early.
Yes. Oh, inset. We've definitely got the inset, the tiger and the paw. So anyway, I'm already... Oh, no, let me just... To finish off that section is that, of course, we keep talking about the three selves.
Yes.
And this is completely... When we have an inquiry stance, this then really feeds into self-motivation, self-direction and self-regulation.
Yeah.
So that self-motivation to use, so to read like a writer for informational text features, and to choose, self-motivated to choose and use those text features. When I've gone exploring and I have an understanding of those things, then I'm really self-motivated to choose and use.
Yeah.
Self-direction, anchored, collected, named, we've got these things there, so I can self-regulate. How does that inset work? We've looked at it, we've talked about it. It's anchored there to say that, or the sidebar, whatever it is, I can go, I can self-regulate. Have I got the features of it? Has it linked to my text? When all of that talk, when I've read like a writer, all that talk has been wrapped around this, so I can write so strongly. And self-direction, choice and use.
Yeah.
I don't have to be... I can be I'm not now doing in this piece I need you to, a good informational text will have a title, 3 headings, No, it's how are you best going to, how can you self-direct to best give your reader the information that they need through text and connected text features.
Yep. And might I add, it's all within a workshop model.
Yes.
And with all the timeless T's operating within that.
Yes. Yeah.
The togetherness.
Yes.
The time, the tantalising text, the thinkers talking.
Yes.
Transformative tracking.
Transformative teaching. Like this is what's transforming your teaching. This is, it's being transformed from, your modelling into reading like a writer and writing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True tasks.
This is true tasks.
Yeah.
This is true task all over this.
Stinky die, we would say in Australia. Yeah. All right, so I think we'll wrap up there, Sharon.
Yes.
Great topic today, and I think you nailed it.
Well, thank you very much.
Lots of gold there, lots of gold. A tool that you've used in the classroom?
These posters
from Teachific
are available for those who are accessing Teachific.
But as you said, it's not everything. It gets you started.
Yes, and it's there really as a support to be thinking about.
Yep.
Like you might use those to build a visual around the features that you're introducing. But you might also, your other tool is create your own anchor charts.
Yeah, I was going to say just how wonderful to have those anchor charts up there of the examples of the features that the children have found.
Yes, yes.
And they go, oh, yes, I can use that.
Yes. And adding on to those charts features children have created. As examples as well. Like this is, or to be able to share back and saying, so this is my inset that I've done, and I've, and referencing the chart by saying, and it's helping my reader by. So that would be my tools for this week.
And tantalising text that you've been using recently?
Yes, so I definitely recommend that as a professional reading the whole page.
Reading the whole page?
Yes,
professional reading?
by Michelle Kelly and Nikki Clausen-Grace.
Yep.
And, of course, what other tantalising texts? I'm going to recommend non-fiction. And there's just a few, one title in particular in a moment, but you're really looking for... you're just looking for extraordinary, exceptional texts, informational texts that you can really go exploring with your students. DK, the publisher...
Oh, they've got fabulous books, haven't they?
You cannot, it's exquisite, the attention that they give to using the full range of text features well.
Yep.
So any of the DK books, I think, are really great examples of how to organise, how you can have a page full of text and text features. So any of those, they're great models to use, as well as, having collections of DK books on different topics so that your children can really learn so much. And once they know how to read the whole page, they're going to get so much more out of these types of books.
And I'm not just saying DK, but would it be true that a child reading DK books is at one end of the scale and a child looking at that same information on the internet is at the other end of the scale? Not always, but...
No, but, well, I want to be critical as a teacher of providing the richest text opportunities that I can to my students so that I can get richer understanding and richer writing from them. So there are many texts on the internet that are just big blocks of text with very few other features. And then there are some texts that do have a lot of features. But it is also, I'm just going to say this little piece about being together and being able to sit around a book and looking, so sitting around a page and reading with somebody or reading for myself and exploring and noticing and sharing. All of those things are, those types of texts. I absolutely want to be mindful of bringing good examples. And we're not saying that there are not good examples on the internet. Of course, some books are e-books, and so they're going to have those examples too. So, yes, it's just being mindful and intentional about the text. Yep. Yes. So, as you say, it's not just DK, but that type of book, where there's lots of... but then I've talked about, like A Seed is Sleepy. It's an illustrated informational narrative. So there's informational and narrative features in that text, but they've done it well. And I think this is the exciting thing, is to actually really go exploring what texts bring to us, the features that they bring, because there's just a rich world out there. And I just also want to give a big shout out to Elkie, who introduced, I'd introduced her to a book. Title has escaped me. I think it was called The Book of Beetles, that she absolutely loved for all its features as an informational text. Went looking for it, couldn't find that one, but came across some other books, and she's now shared... she just on that day could not help but send to me some photos. The books had arrived that day. She was at a workshop. So when she got back to school, the book, The Street Beneath My Feet, had arrived. And it's a book, pages completely fold out, and they go down through the layers of the ground right into the core of the earth.
Wow. Oh.
So this book folds out and out and out and out, and then we've got all of these. It's not photographed, it's an illustrated text, but with all of these features over this text. Now, we just both, I think, fell to the centre of the earth, completely enamoured by all of the features that book presented. So
I'm going to find that one.
Yes, and I know Elkie's got more. So we'll mention some more. Yes,
you're working at.
So we'll get more recommendations from Elkie along the way.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. And hopefully some people on our Facebook page after this podcast might also recommend some fabulous
non-fiction
informational texts that they use, have accessed,
we might
know about.
Yeah, we'll pose that as a question.
Yes. Yeah. Fantastic. All right, I've probably rambled over time here, Phil.
Oh, well, we needed to. I think it was just so important. Wonderful topic today. Thank you, Sharon. And thank you, everyone, for being with us today on our podcast. And stay tuned for next week. I'm glad you could join us. Please join us on our various platforms, our contact page on our Q Learning site or on our Facebook group, or subscribing to the podcast, which hopefully you've done by now. I'm going to do the word teacher in Thai language. And here we go, Karu. So thank you, everyone. And thank you, Sharon, for being our co-host today. And
loved it.
See you next week. Okay.
Shall do. Bye, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. To make sure you don't miss any literacy learning tips and insights, please subscribe to our show on your favourite podcast player. At Q Learning, our literacy specialists draw on over 30 years of teaching and international consulting experience to deliver world-class learning solutions. We equip, empower and support teachers to become their authentic selves. To find out about upcoming webinars and about how Q can help you and your school, visit qlearning.com.au. And you can get even more amazing teaching resources right now at teachific.com.au. Stay tuned.